Yeah, so missions now is such I would say, a central focus of what we do here at Taylor's. I mean, I think every single week we hear either a report or news of a trip that's being planned or a partner that we're working with. So it's commonplace for us now, but I don't think it would be fair to say that was the case at the beginning of Baptist history. I think it comes more into focus in the late 1700s. The first missionary society for Baptists was the Baptist Missionary Society in 1792. So if we consider, it depends on what date you want to use. You could either use like the 1608 date for Baptist origin, or you could go back further to 1525 for the Anabaptists if you want to go back that far. But that's a good 100+ years between founding, almost 200 if you use 1608, 200 years or so before missions becomes a majority focus of Baptist life. So that time frame is when we have William Carey and Lottie Moon, and those names are, of course, I'm sure familiar to both of you. I didn't know them. Well, I knew Lottie Moon since joining the church because of the offering, but not having grown up in Baptist life or missions life either. I didn't know William Carey until I started seminary, and so I was quite surprised to learn how influential he was on all kinds of modern missions. And I can even see, looking back, how even though I didn't attend a church that was Baptist, I can see those strategies were similar to the ones that my church used, even though they're not Baptist by definition. And obviously he's highly influential in what we do here, looking back. And of course Lottie Moon and all the incredibly difficult work she did, and her intersection with Baptist history with Crawford Toy. Are y'all familiar with that?
Yeah.
I mean, what a surprising. I mean, that's almost worthy of a film.
That's true.
A love story gone awry by that might be the first movie that had its drama due to bad theology, but most romance movies don't have breakups due to bad theology, but this would be the first, I think.
Yeah.
So I knew of the controversy with Crawford Toy, and I knew who Lottie Moon was, but until reading these books, I didn't know that they actually intersected in that way. It was fascinating. So can't and Amanda actually read a book recently for the Judsons, Adoniram and Ann, and how hard they worked and all the family that they buried and their labors.
Yeah. Well, what's her book? To the Golden Shore?
No, this was a biography, and I don't know the author though. Amanda read it, I think, at Josh Duncan's recommendation, or was it Jeremy's? Either way, but she loved it, and so I'm going to try and get one copy as well. And I'm researching John G. Patton, not for this class, but for a different class.
He's the South African?
No, he was the South Asian. They're the South Sea Cannibals. So you remember Pastor Josh? His youngest child is named Patton.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's that missionary. He's the one who he and his missionary friends had to hide in trees because the cannibals were coming to kill them and eat them. And if you can get a hold of his biography, it is somewhat difficult to read because of the form of English used is occasionally difficult, but it is readable. It might just take a minute because I had trouble, and I'm accustomed to reading older documents, but even I was like, hang on a second, what's he saying? But extraordinary stories of faith and bravery in the face of almost daily death. I mean, he buried his first wife, and it was.
What are his dates, roughly?
He was, I believe, 1600s to 1700s. I believe he was turn of the century. I haven't finished his book yet. The first half is his early life and missionary works, and the latter half is when he went to Australia to work on fundraising a society, getting a boat so that supplies and more missions folks could get to the islands and things of that nature. And I talked to Josh about this, and I didn't have any idea. In Australia, actually, they considered the cannibals, or not the cannibals, excuse me, they're Aborigines, unable to comprehend religion, and therefore did not bother evangelizing them, because they thought so little of them ethnically that these simple creatures can't understand religion, so why bother preaching the gospel to them? But what had actually happened is that early in Australian history, when settlers came, they mocked the Aborigine religion such as it was, and then they just started hiding it. And over time, it faded from the settlers' knowledge that they had a religion, and therefore treated them like they didn't have one, and therefore didn't evangelize. So whole generations lost of people who could have been evangelized because of the arrogance based on ethnicity and culture. And Patton saw this, and he thought, I've spent all these time in the South Sea cannibals, and they're even more primitive than the Aborigine people, and they had religion, so I know that these people had something. Yeah. And so he had to go around making his case to the Australian white settlers and he had to bring like attorneys and other clergy with him to make like proven statements that these people had religion, and therefore we need to start evangelizing. It was wild how things were back then.
Tell me his name again.
John G. Patton, P-A-T-O-N.
John G. Patton. Okay.
Yeah, if you can get a hold of his biography, it is a powerful read.
Okay.
And it's powerful before he even goes on his first missionary journey because of his ministry in the UK. It's fascinating stuff. Anyway, yeah, so you know William Carey and Lottie Moon and all that. So that was all. The Baptist Missionary Society was overseas. Later, they formed in 1814. So not too long after, they formed a home mission society, which is this was one heck of a title, but General Missionary Convention of the Baptist Denomination in the United States of America for Foreign Missions. Or the GMCBD USAFM. They loved their titles, man. I said, how on earth do you fit, especially in the old style of writing, how do you even fit that on a page?
Right.
So that convened in 1814 with Richard Furman as the first president, and that's our Richard Furman,
right.
future president of Southern, and all that. North and South would meet together. And it was all based around the purpose of missions. At that point, education was not a focus or anything else. It was all about missions. And then the American Home Baptist Mission Society was in 1832. So that was relatively soon after as well, and that was all USA-based missions work. And you probably know this, but in 1821, the first Baptist State Convention popped up right here in South Carolina. So we led the way in that. And then in 1845, so during all this time, things are proceeding with the General Missionary Convention and the Home Mission Board until 1845, which is when the Southern Baptist Convention was formed. And I brought this up in the first lecture when we're talking about Baptist history, that one of the primary cause of the formation of the SBC was ostensibly over the Great Commission, because the situation was that the missions board was not going to appoint slaveholders as missionaries. Even if all their theology was orthodox and they demonstrated a talent for evangelism and had a passion for foreign missions or home missions, they were not appointing slaveholders to those missions, and that caused a schism. And so in the literature of the founding, that's described as the reason for why the SBC is being formed as a Great Commission issue. In their words, they said they were being forbidden for speaking the truth of the gospel to the Gentiles. That is perhaps a situation where something is technically true, but it's hard to divorce what was actually happening and what the real heart of the matter was. Is we don't want to give up slavery and be in fellowship with you. You're not going to roll with us on this, and so we're going to go do our own thing. So hard to separate that. But on paper, that was the cause. It was about missions. Person of Great Commission. And ever since then, the SBC has more or less stayed focused on missions, and there's not been an overwhelming amount of change. Things have through the cooperative program, things have gotten more streamlined. Organizations have been created like the IMB and NAM and all those things. But the general focus has been on missions pretty much ever since.
Well, there's no major Christian organization, well, at least in the United States right now, that have been as mission motivated as Southern Baptists. I mean, when you think about Presbyterian or Episcopalian or others, it's Southern Baptists have led the way.
Absolutely. I don't think any other denomination could come close to making an argument for anything to the contrary. And I remember either 2 or 3 years ago, there were some rumblings over, should we change the name Southern Baptist? Because we're not really just Southern anymore. We're global. And even if you look at just the United States, we're far more than just Southern. And I heard one of the names floated was Great Commission Baptists. I said, you know what? That fits. If nothing else, that fits who we are and what we're about. So I personally wouldn't mind that, but also I didn't grow up attached to the name the way that some folks have. I'd be curious to know how would you feel if our denomination rebranded, so to speak, to be Great Commission Baptists?
Wouldn't make much difference.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't change what we do.
No, I think it'd be great. It would just take 3 sentences afterwards to explain who that really is and how that comes down historically.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. Whenever you change a name, there's a whole lot of good and bad baggage attached to that name, and
I think that would be a great choice.
Yeah, if it was done, yeah. I think the other part of it is trying to get away from the negative past history of Southern Baptist, and I can understand that, but at the same time, we've been known one way for hundreds of 1845, so 150-ish years thereabouts. Yeah. So hard to change after all that history, but at the same time, it'd be interesting to know if the positives outweighed the negatives.
Especially like in North Greenville.
The Crusaders.
Trying to think of it. Their mascot is Crusaders, and up until 20 years ago, that name didn't ring a bell with anybody in terms of association with
negativity,
negative matters, but now it does, and North Greenville is talking about changing their mascot, but it's like you say, you've got some people that say, why in the world would you ever want to change the name of the mascot? Everybody knows.
Yep.
And you say, well, yeah, you're right. Not everybody, but there are some people that have a pretty negative attitude toward that.
Well, maybe they'd let us take paladins, because I don't think they want to be they want to be identified as Christian knights anymore, so they're not using paladins, right? Well, they're still the fervent paladins, but in the spiritual sense, they're not interested in being being identified as such. But we would take that.
That's right.
But that does sound better than Crusader. I would admit.
Well,
but we could go back to the Moonshiners. Isn't that what we were?
That's right.
Mountaineers, I think. Close cousin.
Yeah, that might be taking on baggage of a different sort.
I thought it might be nice to take on the name of Clifton's mascot, Tigers, since we are in Tigerville.
That's true.
We could associate it with that.
That's true. That'd certainly be simpler.
I know when we did a church plant briefly, about 5 years, one of the phrases that was used a lot was remove any barriers. And those words can be very much barriers. Southern Baptist, not just geographic region like you were saying, but historically what has been there. That can be barriers for people.
Yeah. It's easy to understand. Anyone with a grasp of history and who can do a quick Google search would find out the origin of our denomination. That could prove a stumbling block for a lot of people,
I think so.
or they would make assumptions about us that aren't warranted. But it's comes with the baggage. I did want to read just from the Baptist Faith and Message 2000 what it says about missions and evangelism. I think it's a good refresher every now and again to review that kind of a document. Here's what it says. It says, "This is a duty and privilege of every follower of Christ and of every church of the Lord Jesus Christ to endeavor to make disciples of all nations. The new birth of man's spirit by God's Holy Spirit means the birth of love for others. Missionary effort on the part of all rests thus upon a spiritual necessity of the regenerate life and is expressly and repeatedly commanded in the teachings of Christ. The Lord Jesus Christ has commanded the preaching of the gospel to all nations. It is the duty of every child of God to seek constantly to win the lost to Christ by verbal witness, undergirded by a Christian lifestyle and by other methods in harmony with the gospel of Christ." So, in thinking about my history of speaking with people about Jesus or where I've come from, it is interesting and I think wonderful that it says to win the lost by verbal witness, undergirded by the Christian life. Because I've heard the phrase, and when I was young, I heard it all the time, and maybe for it too, is, what was it? It was,
If you have to use words.
yes. Always preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. And I think, in retrospect, I can see how that falls into the well-intentioned but completely misguided aspect of gospel preaching, because you always have to use words. And the pastor that I heard that from in a film said, if that's all you do, they'll go to hell thinking you're just a good person.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you've accomplished nothing if you don't actually tell them what the gospel is. So that when I heard that was a pretty profound thing that hit me, because I had not thought anything twice about that slogan until I said, "Oh gosh, yeah," because it's very easy to just live like a Christian and not actually say anything and be like, "Well, that was good enough."
I was just thinking about Nathan Finn's sermon today. Talking about Paul going from house to house.
Yeah.
I can only assume he was going house to house to talk to people and using the words.
Yeah. What I was highlighting this morning is I did not shrink from teaching any of the whole counsel of God.
Yeah.
And I was like, any part, that including the tough stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that gets the door slammed in your face or a whole lot worse.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. And then yesterday we had our Serve Saturday. Did I see you guys there?
No.
I was a little bleary-eyed. I was tired, and we had the birthday party yesterday for Caleb and all that stuff. But I did go to Serve Saturday, and we went over to Spring Grove.
Yeah.
And we so it was the young professionals, young marrieds, and a few grown-ups, as I still call them. Stephen and Blake led our team, and we hosted a block party for the community.
Okay.
And of course, with all the nasty weather,
I wondered if
we had about a dozen or so folks come. 3 or 4 were members of Community Mission Baptist Church that's in their community that we partner with, and then the rest of them were not. And so we did get those people there, and they did hear the gospel presentation. The way we did it, which I thought was clever. I was wondering how we were going to do it so that everyone could hear it, but we did a raffle. So when people came in, we give them tickets, and said at 12 o'clock we're going to pull the prize for the raffle. And what he did is he pulled the prize, and he said, "All right, here's the winners. All right," and he launched into a gospel presentation. He used the raffle as a gift that's given, not earned. But a gift is no good unless you actually receive it.
Right.
And so he.
That was good.
Blake
Who
used
did that?
Blake.
Blake. Yes.
Our resident.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. He and Stephen are, I would say, our point people for our work in the community. And I'm very proud to say that a number of the young professional men that I get to lead on Sunday mornings, they're involved quite a lot, and going out with Stephen on Thursday afternoons, and just talking to people and praying with them, and we've got their names up on our board. And I ask them every week, like, hey, what's new with that? I'm hoping to go a few times, but I got my regular job, and I can't exactly be gone for 3 hours on a Thursday afternoon without explanation. So I'm trying to work out a way to at least do it a few times, to make sure that I'm working on that element of my walk, is because I'm not the most forward person with strangers, and this is a really good environment. And I can watch Stephen, who is an absolute master of that. He can talk to a brick wall, and it might actually talk back to him. So I enjoy all my time spent with him. I always learn a lot in speaking with him. So that's kind of what I've been involved in recently. So you can do
That's
that kind
great.
of thing.
Well, I have wondered how you make a living with doing all these other things.
Well, what I tell people is people say, well, do you like your job or do you love your job? I say I love it in as much as it allows me to do all the things that I actually love to do, which is this. I love participating in student ministry. I love getting to lead the young pros, and I love getting to be a seminary student. I love getting to attend church events like Serve Saturday, and the job I have provides the means for that to happen, and for us to not be panicky about finances. So if I want to do those things, I don't have to be working on a Saturday to make ends meet. I can do all those things, and of course, Amanda working at the church helps too. I do get to know about the serving opportunities before
great.
some people.
Yeah.
I just love what you're sharing about your slice of the pie, how you are at the church. It makes me hungry for the people in our life group to know firsthand. And we're hearing what you guys are doing, and the basketball, all of that. I'm thinking, I want people to know that, and maybe people do, and I just didn't.
So I'll tell you something that we do need. So the way things work with that right now is I'm more on the player side because I love to play basketball and I need the exercise. And so I tend to be on the player side, but we do have guys come like Blake or Caleb Ross, who, even though Caleb is far more athletic than I am, he's not quite the basketball player, but he is a people person. And so Blake and Caleb, Joseph, since he had his ACL tear, they're talking to people, following up with them, having conversations. But here's an area where we have lack. When the girlfriends of these guys come, and they do come, it's a little weird if a strange man sits down and starts talking to the ladies all by myself. We need ladies to talk to these women because we want them to be ministered to as well. And Stephen will come up and talk to them occasionally, but again, it's kind of it's not quite feel like for me just to plop myself down next to them and start chatting them up. It's just doesn't quite feel right. So we would need some ladies, whether on the young pro side or middle-aged life group or older life group. Like I very much want that. I know Stephen does too, because those women deserve love and care just like we're trying to give to these guys.
How many would there be, would you guess?
It varies.
Okay.
So last year, I would say the average, on average, probably had 6 or 7 women coming who were not church. There's the girlfriends of the guys that were coming and playing. This year so far, it's been slower, maybe 2 or 3. So far, not as much need, but last year I was really like, man, like we got sometimes 8 or 10 girls here who are there. Of course, they all sit together, but there's no one there from the church to talk to them or anything like that. So I think Stephen is aware of that, and he put the word out to us through Blake this morning that, like, hey, young pro ladies, if you're looking for an opportunity to get involved in ministry, yes, it's late, but here's the opportunity. This is where people are. Kind of like you were talking about. This is where some people are. The only other thing I had to talk about tonight was the cooperative program, which I imagine due to experience, y'all are probably more versed in than even I am. But it was relatively new to me, not coming from Baptist life. The idea of all these churches networking together in an autonomous yet cooperative way to achieve some pretty incredible goals with the number of seminaries and the IMB and NAM and Send Relief and all the myriad programs that are funded through that giving. It's quite an achievement. And I don't have the date off the top of my head for when the cooperative. I want to say it was in the 1800s when the cooperative program officially launched, but I don't believe it picked up steam until the 1900s, and then it's been off to the races ever since. And so that's from just off the top of my head from the reading from Dr. Finn's book. But it's been quite an enjoyable experience seeing how well so many different churches can work together for a common purpose without compromising on critical issues. Because not just within the cooperative program, but I know we do cooperate with other denominations in certain areas and in certain ways. I'm sure we partner with other resources for like the Piedmont Women's Center. I'm sure we're not the only church supporting them. But it is interesting that so many diverse peoples, because we have a great diversity in Southern Baptist life, from people who live here in the South, the North, Midwest, West, Southwest, like all different cultures, but we're all united around enough common purpose to get some incredible things done for the kingdom. And then I have watched the convention a little bit here and there, admittedly sometimes for the spicy bits of things that are up for debate, but also just to see how business is done. And it is, I think it is something providential and blessed by the Lord that many people can come together and not get into fistfights over really though, because normally you put that many people in a room and try to get things done, you're in trouble. It's going to be difficult. Yeah. And yet, the Lord has blessed this method of polity and ecclesiology and cooperation to get some really incredible things done.
Well, that's another Southern Baptist distinctive. That other denominations just basically don't follow, or they don't have that kind of undergirding for their missions and so forth.
Yeah, we talked about that last week actually, ecclesiology and polity, and how in what ways are Baptists distinct in that. And I would say that